Carol Leonnig, there are maybe a handful of stories that are so surreal that when you are saying the words out loud, and I think of the early months of COVID, frankly, all the months of COVID, and seeing streets all around the world empty. I think of the days and weeks and months after 9/11. I think of, any sort of international natural disaster tragedy. But this is one of those stories where you say the words, Donald Trump will take a mugshot today and may or may not be weighed, that it just has this surreal feeling. And I don't want to gloss over how completely abnormal it is and how completely inevitable it was that this day would come. What are your thoughts?
I think you've got a good, an important point to make here, Nicole, about all of us taking a breath and thinking about the history that's made. Sometimes that can be breathtaking because I remember in the spring of this year when we were all watching Alvin Bragg bring his charges against the former president, and it was a stunner to see the 45th president enter a Manhattan courthouse to be processed for arrest and to be charged formally. I think we've hit a couple indictments since then, and it is important. The whole idea of a mugshot kind of brings someone down in a dramatic way, and I don't doubt that was a small part of why Mark Meadows, the former chief of staff, and his attorneys were fighting so hard to separate this from and bring it back to federal court before a mugshot. The ignominy, right, of being kind of booked, if you will. The former president being presented in this same light is really meaning to the office and painful probably for all of us in the country, whether it's somebody who's a ardent Trump supporter or someone who is an ardent Trump critic. It is devastating for the country to have this happen. But I'll say one thing back to your idea of steely, if I can, the steeliness of Fani Willis. She is a county district attorney working in a state system. And what she essentially concluded after reading a story in the Washington Post in January of 2021, describing and detailing an audio tape call between the president and Brad Raffensperger, in which the president asked the then Georgia Secretary of State to find him 11,000 plus votes. What she concluded was, okay, you are messing with Georgia state elections. It's likely a crime if this is true. The federal government had the same option. It is a federal crime to interfere in an election. But Fani Willis plunged forward, and this is where she is. The steeliness reminds me of when I covered the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. I met many, many, many a line attorney whose basic credo was, hey, look, bring in your defendant on Friday for a plea talk, or we're going to charge you and indict you on Monday. Let us know how you feel. Well, she decided, okay, you don't want to play? I'm going to charge all 19 of you. I would think the steeliness could pay off for Fani Willis in that a couple of people are already telegraphing that they're not ready to kind of go down with this ship. That's the vibe you pick up from a few people. And so her steeliness may lead to quite a few people essentially being picked off, which was the mode of the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. when they said, come on in Friday or else.
Is that what you think is happening with someone like Chesebro wanting to get his, not wanting his life to be on pause indefinitely, or do you see something that we don't see just yet?
I can't speculate or tell. There could be a lot of things going on here. There's one element of Chesebro's demand for a speedy trial that could be helpful to the other defendants in that they would essentially get a preview of the case if that is how this happens, if this is how this goes down. It would also be pretty challenging, as Gwen points out, to describe a broad conspiracy with basically, a relatively small bit player when you think about the overarching effort that Fani Willis alleges in her 100+ overt acts.
Frank, I want to pick up on something Carol said about what is devastating about today. I don't disagree, but I think what is devastating about the mugshot isn't the image, it's the acts. And it's so many acts that led to this one mugshot. It's the 6 acts of alleged criminal obstruction of justice in Volume 2 of the Mueller case. It's being named Individual 1, an unindicted co-conspirator, but a co-conspirator all the same, in an illegal campaign finance scheme that sent Michael Cohen to jail. It is the brazen abuse of power that led to him withholding military aid approved by Congress from President Zelensky at war with Russia. And then it is finally his brazen efforts to cling to power using extrajudicial and unconstitutional methods. It is, again, shocking and devastating, but so completely overdue and inevitable.
Yeah, these mugshots that many people are talking about, almost reveling in, are far more than just someone's image. They are, in fact, a snapshot in history. This is history in the making. And that Rice Street jail you spoke of in Fulton County, with all of its issues, is where corruption's colliding with consequences. And that's what we're seeing in these mugshots. It is a slap in the face for anybody of this kind of stature to come in and get processed in that facility. And America needs to see that. The world needs to see this in a historical perspective. You know, it's not only history for the nation writ large, it's history for law enforcement. I have to think back to the late 60s and early 70s for a moment in law enforcement history where law enforcement, particularly the FBI, but also police departments in major cities, struggled to figure it out. What am I talking about? I'm talking about a period of time with a violent anti-Vietnam protest sometimes, terror groups blowing up police stations. The Symbionese Liberation Army kidnaps Patty Hearst, very anti-government. People start hijacking planes to Cuba. And the FBI is sitting there going, what is going on domestically? There's a similar risk and threat here that law enforcement is trying to get their arms around and do it in a hurry, because while we're focused on this one event this evening, understandably, this is a sustained high security posture that has to be taken for the foreseeable future. Trials that could go on for months, if not years, in appeals, and finding that lone actor or that organization in its infancy that's going to do something bad harkens back to late 60s, early 70s for law enforcement.
But I mean, to stick with the historical parallel, you've got the leader of this movement fanning the flames of just what you're describing, not saying don't do that in my name, but welcoming it seemingly.
Yeah, 60s, 70s was a ground-up people's movement, right? This is being driven by what we call stochastic terrorism. We've heard this phrase before, where a leadership figure paints some party or some person or entity as subhuman, demeans them to the point where people feel very comfortable hurting them, violent acting out against a group now that's been painted as something less than human. That's what we're watching happen.
Carol, I want to give you the last word, and I want to come back to your extraordinary body of reporting and some of it in the books that you wrote with Phil Rucker, really relying on the expertise and the firsthand interactions of old hands in the national security world and what they saw of Trump and that friction of seeing him for who he was, someone who in the tank briefing you describe in one of your fantastic books is ignorant and uninterested in becoming more knowledgeable about the military world affairs, someone who is pig-headed, and I think that's putting it in TV-friendly generous terms, and someone who, you know, John Bolton and others believe is corrupt while they're working in the White House. What are you hearing, if you're hearing from any of them, or what would you surmise their thoughts are to see this catch up with him in a criminal context?
No, I don't think. I'm thinking of a few people, and I cannot, of course, mash them all together as having the same view. But I'm thinking of a few people who were really quite revolted by Donald Trump's behavior as they served him in the last several years, the last basically 2 years of his presidency. And I think that they would not relish this moment, but I know from more recent conversations that they feel very strongly that consequences, as Frank mentioned, have been long in coming for the president, and that your description, for example, of the 4 acts of obstruction in which Robert Mueller had extensive evidence, enough with a normal person to bring a grand jury indictment, that was a moment sort of lost by not explaining to the public how much the president, how much evidence investigators had that he was engaged in criminal obstruction. There are people that, again, I'm thinking of now, who are glad to see, not relishing, not smacking their lips, but glad to see that there are, in their view, consequences for actions finally.